Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today's show, the myths of hormone replacement therapy. Before you men think this is not for you, it is for men as much as it is for women. At the age of 47 to 55-ish, everyone goes through a change in their body. Women know it as menopause, and men don't know, but it's called andropause. It's literally the male version of menopause. So everyone has hormones, and as we age, everyone loses them. So we're going to talk today with Jeanne Peters about the myths about hormone replacement therapy. Now, if you're a guy and you're still here, awesome, keep going. If you're a woman whose man needs to hear this and you don't think he's going to hear it from a woman, we did a show way back in the beginning, episode 96 on the Fit to Love podcast show called The Truth About Bioidentical Hormones. And that was with Dr. Alan Peters, Jeanne's husband and partner in their medical clinic. That show quality in terms of the audio isn't awesome, but the information is. So if you haven't heard from the Fit to Love podcast, episode 96, The Truth About Bioidentical Hormones, it's a complement and maybe even a part one to today's show. Today's show, we're going to take it another step further. We're going to cover new things. Jeanne didn't feel comfortable giving all the same studies because she is a registered dietitian who is very, very entrenched in hormone replacement therapy and bioidentical hormones because it's what they do at their practice, but isn't technically a medical physician, so she wasn't going to speak from that vantage point. She can talk about all the things that she knows, just like I talk about things that I know and have researched, but I'm not a doctor. So she didn't want to give anyone false advice. So I would recommend that whether it's you or your male person in your life, father, brother, husband, if you think they'll hear it better from a male, have them start with The Truth About Bioidentical Hormones, episode 96 on the Fit to Love podcast show. Before I remind you, for those of you that have been listening for a while, about Jeanne Peters, I first want to throw out a opportunity, and I have been asking for it in the Manifestation Challenge because quite honestly, I prefer to only really work with people who've listened to my show for a while. Like you really know, like, and trust me, and we have a relationship. You didn't just find me yesterday or, you are kind of tentative about what I'm talking about. Like you're all in, you've bought in. So the opportunity is that I'm looking for 1 to 3 more interns. So at first it wouldn't be a paid position, but it would eventually be paid hours that someone could make. But I'm looking for some help in the ways of social media marketing. Pinterest is one of them, and I do have some education I can share about how to do that. I might be interested in someone who is really good and proficient at LinkedIn, but I'll tell you right now, Instagram and Facebook, I'm not interested in because I use them, and whether I use them well or not, it's a different story, but I'm using them and I use them actively. So if anyone has a knowledge or would like to learn more about social media marketing in Pinterest or can take that on or LinkedIn, you're going to email me, jj@jjflazanes.com. jj@jjflazanes.com for an internship. And if you're hearing this in the distant future, you still can check in because sometimes I do get new opportunities to add on people to the team where I could use some help. So let's get on to today's show. Jeanne Peters. Jeanne Peters has a passion to help empower her clients to eat well and enjoy an active, healthy life at any age. She has followed a career path that has earned her recognition as an expert in food, nutrition, and healthy aging. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in clinical nutrition from the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1979. She's been in this field for a long time. She currently is the co-founder of Nourishing Wellness Medical Center with Doc Allen, her husband of 34 years. She offers personalized nutrition coaching, whole foods cooking classes, and healthy aging seminars geared towards women and men who want to be nourished by the fountain of youth. To balance her career, Jeanne enjoys working in her edible organic garden, preserving cultured foods, raising 7 heirloom backyard chickens, and cooking from her garden for her extended family of 3 amazing boys, their wives and girlfriend, plus 3 very active grandchildren. You can learn more about Jeanne Peters at nourishingwellness.com. And Jeanne has participated in many of my live events, as well as been on this show more than any other person to date. Welcome everyone to the show today. I have back our number one interviewed guest, Jeanne Peters of Nourishing Wellness. And today I brought Jeanne back. It's been a while since we've been on video. We do a lot of audio, and we've actually done a keto Q&A with Jeanne in the Inner Circle. So those of you that want to know more about keto detailed stuff, consider joining our Inner Circle. But today we want to talk about hormones. It's been a long time since I've talked about hormones on this show. And it was actually Jeanne's husband, Dr. Alan Peters, who originally did a show called The Truth About Bioidentical Hormones. And I wanted to do sort of an updated version of that with Jeanne today because of a couple different reasons. One, that show was probably 6 years ago. And it's amazing to me that in 6 years, how many people still fear bioidentical hormones. And it just goes to show, as Dr. Northrup said on the show, it takes 17 years to change the paradigm in Western medicine, even when we have plenty of science to prove what it is we're talking about. And here's another case in point where bioidentical hormones, everybody, bioidentical. It is literally what your body is making, not synthetic, and you're still afraid of them. It's like fear, like this pandemic is about fear. Everything, like, it's amazing how much fear rides your choices and dictates your choices. So Jeanne, with that said, because you deal with specifically a lot of people coming in, and you as a medical center recommend hormone replacement therapy for many of your patients, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have found that it can be a game changer for so many men and women. But of course, it's not just the hormones. It's also looking at lifestyle and food and, the way that you treat your body, your self-care, all of those things can impact, how your hormones are able to support your well-being over your lifetime. So a lot of what we do is do that due diligence to check. But once we know if somebody's low or high, then we start looking at why is that happening?
I want to start. I want to go over some of the myths about the dangers, and I know that you're not as comfortable as Dr. Allen is about citing all the different research that's been done for years about the safety of bioidentical hormones. But before we get too much further into the episode today, I do want to mention that Jeanne has a happy hormone guide that cites these references, and you can find that at nourishingwellness.com. Again, it's the happy hormone guide at nourishingwellness.com that will reference all of these studies.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's great.
First, let's talk about why somebody would want to track or look at their hormones. What are some of the major symptoms that people may be aware of or unaware of what happens when we have either elevated to a dangerous level, or what happens to most of us, you're too low in certain hormones? Why should I care about my hormone panel?
That's a great question. And, a lot of what we use as a guide is just what are people's symptoms. And we're looking at sex hormones, your stress hormones, which is your DHEA and your cortisol. And then we're looking at some of your metabolic hormones like insulin. So a lot of women will come to us and say, geez, I just feel like I'm so wired, but I feel wired at night, but I can't sleep. And, I feel exhausted when I wake up in the morning. I mean, that's a certain hormone panel that there's certain hormones that are probably in and out of balance. A lot of women just feel like I'm putting weight on the middle no matter what I do. I mean, I had a woman yesterday who just shared with me that, she had her children and she was able to lose weight after each one of them. And then she hit 40 and it's all of a sudden she started seeing weight come on her belly. Typically a beautiful hourglass shape that many women have in their 20s starts to change when estrogen starts going down or when progesterone starts going down. So, a lot of it is just based on your symptoms. Can you sleep? Do you have unusual cravings? Do you feel like PMS symptoms are just exaggerated for 2 weeks out of the month? You just feel like you're just out of balance. Generally, there's a reason why you're having those symptoms.
And then long term, thinking about, preventative aging. I mean, our hormones are really part of our life force of things that keep us together, right? Right. Yeah, so if you're feeling sluggish and lethargic and lack of energy and weaker and slower and brain fog, don't hormones play a role in us optimally keeping ourselves at that level for the rest of our lives?
Well, you take a look at like estrogen and progesterone. I mean, those are two that most women are familiar with because that's what ultimately determines, your secondary sex characteristics when you get your period and that. But estrogen plays such an amazing role. Like it is like your energizer. Like when your estrogen levels are high, you have good energy to be able to get your workout done, to get your work done, to be able to raise your children, to be able to just get through life. When your estrogen starts going down, your bones start playing a role, like your bone health and your cardiac health. Like estrogen protects your heart so beautifully. That's why women don't tend to get heart attacks in early life, and menopause. It's not even until later life when their estrogen levels are really low that they start having some of the same symptoms that men have maybe in their 40s. So these hormones play a valuable role in your bone health, in your heart health, for sure in your brain. You have receptor sites. When you think about it, JJ, when we think about like paleo man, they both men and women required optimal hormone health to be able to go ahead and not only, allow us to conceive our children, but to be able to manage the difficulties of just raising children. And nothing is truer now than it was. So when you think about just where we've been, the stresses of life have just impacted us even more so. So our hormones are even more critical right now because of just inflammation and stress and some of the toxins that we're exposed to. It just becomes more critical to be able to keep your hormones in balance. So not just for your sense of well-being, but also just for your longevity.
Since I've been working with you guys since about 2007, I believe that was, or maybe even as far back as 2006, understanding prevention and seeing, how long it takes to change somebody's hormone panel and how long it takes to decrease. So I know I've often heard, whether it be you or Dr. Allen or someone else, say that if someone has a thyroid issue and they're only getting their TSH tested, their thyroid stimulating hormone, and because in Western medicine, that range is so long that it could be years before a thyroid condition is detected if that's the only test that you're taking. And so looking at prevention and using that model to see how our hormones fluctuate, how we build them, how we can create them ourselves from lifestyle choices, getting out ahead of it is usually going to be a much better choice, and wanting to make sure that, you're balanced and to be able to take a look at that. Doug and I just did our hormone panels recently through Life Extension. And of course I was, directing that and telling them what to take and which panels to do to look at sort of just general health. There's no issue or problem. It's just, hey, I haven't had this done in a while. And I want to know where my symptoms are coming from for some things. And now I can rule out that some of it's physical. I can look at the emotional or stress levels. So so besides weight gain and weight loss, strength, vitality, sleep, brain fog, these are all reasons why you'd want to understand where your hormones are and getting out ahead of them. Let's talk about so you've mentioned some of the symptoms. Let's talk about some of the myths that people still have. So why do you think people are still, especially women, are afraid of considering bioidentical hormones?
I think the biggest thing is just simply because just the way that physicians are being trained in medical school, they aren't really, well, let me step it back. In 2002, many women were on hormone replacement therapy. 2002, we did the largest study ever. It was the Women's Health Initiative. We had over 400,000 women on not bioidentical. We had them on synthetic hormones at the time. So this were hormones that, made from horse urine, and we were studying them to see how they were doing. And at that point, many physicians were trained on how to use them. During that study, we stopped it. We stopped it suddenly in 2002 because some women were having blood clots, and we were concerned about the impact of the progesterone that was being used, and they just stopped the study entirely. And that was a huge, huge disservice that we did to women, because in many cases, a lot of those women were getting benefits. For sure, they were getting like bone building benefits from having both estrogen and progesterone. But when we stopped it, it was never really there was never really any kind of education that was done with the physicians at that time. And so there was a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of, I think maybe because of the pharmaceutical companies, they were not interested in having anything that would compete with what they were trying to do. And it was botched. it was mismanaged. There was so much more that we could have done to help educate women. So that's one thing. The second thing is that at the time, those were synthetics. We still have synthetics. Many women are on hormone replacement therapy because that's something that a lot of women's insurance will cover. What we do know is that some women thrive on them and a lot of women don't. What happened, though, is that in Europe for 40 years, it's now probably even closer to 50 years, they've been using bioidentical hormones. And as you stated in the beginning, all bioidentical hormones are made from wild yams. All of them, whether it's testosterone, progesterone, or estrogen. It's all made from wild yam. It's just a matter of small little differences between the two. So they've been using it successfully. And but because you can't patent that, because it's made from a natural ingredient, you can't patent it. There was never any desire by the pharmaceutical companies to accept that. And remember, pharmaceutical companies they now drive the agenda that doctors are being trained in. So unfortunately, many physicians have always poo-pooed it. They've, made the point that, they're done in compounding pharmacies. Compounding pharmacies don't have the same standards. That's not true, by the way. Compounding pharmacies, because the FDA regulates them, makes them even have to drive to higher standards than what you would find in general pharmacies. So, unfortunately, there's just a lot of miseducation, misinformation, and many of it is from your own physician. So they're not necessarily being trained on how to treat you. They don't recognize it, so they don't even want to do the test, because if they do the test, the standard medical practice is if you have a patient who has low levels, then you're expected to treat that patient. And because they're not being trained on how to do that, many of them will shy away from doing it. So that's why you have to, sometimes go outside of, your healthcare plan and go to some place like Life Extension, where it's a consumer-driven lab company, and they're happy to go ahead and do these labs for you. But be aware that, if you're asking your physician to go ahead and get these labs done and they refuse to do it, that may be part of the reason. Many of them, just don't feel comfortable, talking about it or learning how they could help you.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of everyone taking control of their health. And so is Dr. Northrup, and she's been on twice in terms of telling people to follow not only your tests and part of doctor's information, but your own intuition about what your body needs, and then testing things out. So for those of you that don't know, you can pay to get your own labs done at Life Extension. Now, of course, you may want to ask for guidance if you don't know what you're testing for, but there are a couple of pretty basic panels on there. There's a weight management, metabolic panel that's pretty standard. In fact, it's all the hormones that I recommend in the Invisible Fitness formula that I learned from Jeanne Allen and Nourishing Wellness about looking at weight loss resistance and aging, and keeping those hormones, including B12 and ferritin and iron and vitamin D. And so it is becoming more standardized. I think that there are more doctors who, because of the amount of people asking for it, are acquiescing because they're the patient. But everybody, you're the patient. And I think we have to move away from it. I'm glad you said that, Jeannie, because I know sometimes I get looked at as like I'm the heretic. But, again, you have to follow the money. And pharmaceutical companies have their hand in, you got to follow where the money goes. They have no interest in promoting something because they can't patent it, make money from it. And that's really the bottom line. So you're not getting real information that's scientifically backed, that's at your best interest from some of your doctors and the government for sure, and pharmaceutical companies for sure. So the CDC, the WHO, all of them, there's a money trail. And
it's so true. There's
a money trail, right? And those of us pushing natural alternative medicine, while we'd love you to work with us, we don't need your however many dollars to, right? Like, we actually care about helping your health in a way that's supported by the sciences that are studied today by functional medicine doctors and naturopathic doctors and people who are really up to date on what we're looking at and what's in our food and what's real today, not what was real 20 years ago that we're just repeating blindly through prescriptions and the way that Western medicine is presented to you. So if you have concerns about bioidentical hormones, even after this show, there's a lot of resources for that, but I would definitely recommend to reach out to Jeanne and Alan about it and your concerns. So, because I know that we've talked about, I think Alan and I talked about it on that very first show, that if you're looking at risk versus benefit, and I had to do this recently, with the fibroid situation that I had, one of the concerns for me was that 5%, 10% chance something would go wrong. And if it went wrong, I'd have to have some kind of surgery and possibly bleed out and blah, 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 right? and the gynecologist who said, "You make me nervous," wanted to prescribe me hormones. And it was the first time I actually got excited about a prescription. And I said, "Great, bioidentical." And she said, "No." And I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me right now?" And then I had to weigh the benefit versus the risk. And I thought, well, if I have to take a few of them to stop from heavily bleeding, I'm probably going to be fine. So I took the prescription. But Alan talked about, and I want you to address that the cause of death for a lot of older adults is not based on breast cancer and hormones. It's based on hip fractures and bone related things, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the reason why that in 2002, when they stopped that Women's Health Initiative, I mean, Alan and I were just really, really amazed because so many women had stronger bones. And at that time, we weren't pushing bisphosphonates, which are these bone building drugs, because, at the time we had these estrogens, and estrogen, even at a synthetic level, it helped to improve women's bone health. So yeah, it's unfortunate that, what happened, but it's going forward. It's just wise for women to know that there's lots of options, things that I can do. I have a gal that came in, more and more women are coming at very young ages and already showing hormone imbalances, like their estrogen is high because their progesterone is so low. And there's reasons that we can talk about why that's happening. But I had a gal that was in here that's like 21, and she's having terrible PMS. Well, there's actually a bioidentical cream that you can buy over the counter. That's 1% cream. It's not a 2% like we would prescribe, but it's 1%. It's made from wild yam cream. I've had her use it. She takes it from day 14 to day 28. She's had amazing improvements in just a very short period of time. Within one cycle. Within one cycle, she's already seen improvements. So, there's things that you can do that it can help to support you, maybe through a bump. I mean, she just had a head injury, and that's probably the reason why she has this low progesterone. We're actually doing some workups on her right now to go ahead and confirm that. But there's usually a reason why some woman may be out of balance with her estrogen, with her progesterone. If her progesterone's low, you're naturally going to be estrogen dominant. There's reasons. So I just want to let women know that are out there right now that if you're feeling things are out of balance and your physicians have said to you, you know what, it's just, it's part of mothering, it's part of aging, it's part of that process. Don't buy that. Don't buy that, because there's probably, you need to dig a little deeper so that, and like you just said, trust your intuition. Let that be your guide, that something's not right and it's worth digging a little deeper to find out what might be going on. There's answers, and that's what I want to leave women with, is just knowing that there's usually answers that can support you.
Let's talk about some of those reasons why younger adults are having imbalanced hormones.
Yeah. Well, this particular gal that came in was, she's a world-class soccer player. So she's playing not at a professional level, but she's playing on a team level. So typically, kids that are on team sports, and that maybe some of these kids are having 2 workouts a day. Just 2 workouts a day. I mean, think about that. What's just 1 workout a day is tough. But many kids who, prior to COVID, were maybe getting up and doing the 6 a.m. workout, and then they were doing the after school workout, that will drive your progesterone down, because it's just an intense kind of thing to be doing. It will make your cortisol levels go higher. So with that happens, women are more likely to be estrogen dominant. And they may have other issues that go along with that, but that's very common that I see in high school athletes. But other things, could be inflammation. I mean, the big drivers of critical factors that impact your hormone balance are going to be toxins, inflammation, and lifestyle. Initially, women who are burning the candle at both ends, maybe they're, running a family, but they're also running a career. And, maybe they're getting to bed at 12 midnight and waking up at 5:30 or 6. There's that kind of shortchanging yourself year after year without getting enough sleep. It's going to have an impact on your hormones. I could go on. I mean, there's lots of examples of why, we're seeing it. And also just, we live in a sea of toxins. I mean, the environmental toxins, particularly those that mimic estrogen. So estrogen mimicking like plastics, like drinking out of plastic bottles. I mean, that's one that we're all, we all do. But you think about men and women who eat a lot of beef that's, feedlot beef, in which they're pumping up, the cattle with estrogens. Those estrogens, impact your own physiology, make you more estrogen dominant. You have to process that. You have to have your liver be able to detoxify that. You may not be getting enough of the kinds of vegetables that will help you do that, particularly like cruciferous vegetables, the ones that have that stinky smell. Those vegetables are rich in these sulfur type of compounds that really help to break estrogens down, even some of these synthetic estrogens, so that your body is able to be a little bit more in balance. Inflammation, we both know, because you and I both are really big foodies, sugar, all your toxic oils, just those two alone, right? They're processed foods, processed grains, all of that has an impact. It's causing your cortisol to perhaps be out of balance, or your insulin, because your body's trying so hard to process these foods that don't belong in your body. So any of those could be reasons why your body might be out of hormone balance, and it could be at a very young age.
Yeah, and we also talked about, I think 6 years ago, I believe at that time, I mentioned it on the show with Alan, that you had a girl come in, I think she was 8, and she had gotten her period, and she was drinking a lot of milk, not organic, probably hormone. Oh, she was drinking soy milk.
Yeah, she was drinking a lot of soy. She was already in puberty. Yeah, she was like early puberty, and she was like 8.5. But her whole thing was that she was basically a vegetarian, and she was eating a ton of soy-based products and drinking a ton of soy milk, and some of these things work as like estrogen mimickers. And plastics, a lot of exposure to plastic.
So in this case, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I actually thought it was the hormones that get injected into the cows that get into your milk, and she was drinking a lot of hormones by default through the milk. But now that you're saying it's soy, let's talk about soy, because people don't realize, there was that time and space where we thought soy was better than milk. And let's talk about how soy acts in the body and why that was detrimental.
Well, I think when I think of soy, so much has happened. Right now, Monsanto, which is recently bought out by Bayer. So Bayer is the largest corporation in the world. And so a lot of agriculture, making soybeans, we provide soybeans for mostly, for feeding cattle and pigs. So you're getting a lot of animals that are consuming large amounts of soy. And so they have these estrogen mimicking effects in their body. When then we consume that, so then we're getting that. But also soy just wreaks havoc with our thyroid. It has an affinity for attacking the thyroid gland. So many people who have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, it could be largely because of the amount of soy that they're consuming, particularly if they're vegetarian. So some of their enzymes will be released into the blood. So we can test for that, and we can find out if your TPO or some of your other thyroid antibodies are elevated. And it's good to know that, because if that's the case, then you want to make some adjustments in your diet so that you can bring those particular hormones back in balance. You can go on for years, by the way, with still having a normal T3 and T4 and a normal TSH, and yet your antibodies can be off the charts. And it's just a matter of time where like a switch can flip from, you have no autoimmune disease to you have autoimmune disease. So Hashimoto's is probably one of the most common autoimmune diseases in the world right now. And, we can help reverse that. I reverse my own just by going ahead and giving up certain things like wheat and gluten. But, for a lot of women, they've been told you've got autoimmune disease and they're treating you for it. But just know that anything with autoimmunity, you can usually reverse.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I know a lot of people get very defensive about their they stay victimized. And so there's also the emotional components of the autoimmune disorder, because there's just so you had referred us, thank you, to Dr. Nasha, and she and I talked about it in her book. She even lists personality types of people more likely to get cancer. So here are the people who get cancer, and here's the common denominator of their emotional and perception of the world and how they act in the world. And guys, it's real stuff. Your emotions will also dictate what you attract,
Right.
in terms, right? So it's mostly the mind, body, and the soul.
The
So we're
spirit.
looking at, right, and what are we doing on a physical level that we can help to enhance our body's ability to heal itself? But then we can't ignore, all the mental and emotional and spiritual stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
because of course, yeah, whenever you think of the thyroid, you're thinking of that's your chakras, and particularly the one that's your throat, how you express yourself, how you express yourself in the world has a lot to do with your thyroid balance. So I'm 100%, right on with what Dr. Nasha has to say about looking at the spirit aspect of different phenotypes, people who attract cancer. They may attract it several times in their lifetime.
Yep. Yeah, yes, and they probably do. And they think, oh, I wasn't healed. Well, you didn't change. And Dr. Bruce Lipton and I talked about this, and Dr. Christian Northrup and I talked about this. So this is a recurring theme. Hopefully by now people are really, if you didn't believe it before, maybe you're starting to understand a little bit more now. So other than obviously prevention, some of the things the reasons why a lot more people these days are having hormone imbalances, what do you think another myth would be? So we know that, there's no money in it for pharmaceutical companies, which is why your doctor doesn't care about it because they weren't trained in it. And they have this fear about it because they bought into the system. But in terms of bioidentical hormones, do you think, let's address the cancer, right? Didn't that study also produce cancers that they blamed on the hormones?
Oh, absolutely. And yet, so in the trials in the big women's health initiative, absolutely, there was concerns about cancer and increased risk. And so, oh goodness, I just feel for all the women over these years who have, because they have, let's say, breast cancer, have been told that they have to have like no estrogen, and they'll completely, if it's like an estrogen-based cancer or it's a progesterone-based, they live with hot flashes and all these issues. What's been interesting is to take a look at the history of breast cancer in women in Europe, because bioidenticals have been used for 40, now I think it's closer to 50 years. So it's interesting to take a look at how little cancer exists. It's often, we feel like, with women who may have had a pre-existing cancer at the same time that they were going ahead and starting. So it may have just been kind of coincidental, not necessarily related. But it's interesting too, JJ, we've had many women who have had cancer. I shouldn't say we have many. We probably have about 15 women in our practice over the last 20 years, 15, 16, 17 years, that have had cancer, and their physicians would not permit them to go on to any kind of bioidenticals. And then but they were convinced that it would benefit them. So we've actually been able to go and educate their physicians, give studies, and physicians have written off, okay, let them do. And these women are thriving. Now, some of the women have left our practice because they've moved or gone out of the area, but a few of them are thriving. So that's a myth, because a lot of women fear cancer. And yet what we do know, both for men and for women, if men who have very low testosterone levels, they're the ones that are at most risk for having prostate cancer. You don't get guys who are in their 20s who have, off the charts testosterone levels. You don't see in the literature anything about those boys having prostate cancer. So it is a myth. And the same thing is true with estrogen and with progesterone. A lot of what we're seeing is just these myths that go on about how we treat these cancers, particularly these estrogen dominant cancers, where they feel that there's like an estrogenic effect. What we're not testing for is to be able to weigh out how much of those cancers have been started simply because we're exposed to so many estrogen mimicking drugs from all of your hair care products and your facial products. And, the average woman uses 10 to 12 different body care products in a day. And you don't necessarily know how much of those have drugs in them, literally drugs that mimic the effects of estrogen. So that's what we haven't been able to tease out. And so we associate that it's because of your own body's production of estrogen, rather than looking at, we live in a sea of plastic. We live in a sea of toxins. And so many of these toxins mimic the effects and jump onto the receptor sites that you have on your cells for estrogen rather than your own. That's why we feel it's so important for women to keep their body fat levels down, not just because you look better, but because you're at less risk for any type of autoimmune disease. Because when you start having more increased fat, you're holding more of those estrogen mimicking compounds in your fat tissue. It's like the storehouse or the warehouse for your body's drugs that it can't process. It can't process them all through your liver. So it starts to vault them. It vaults them in your brain and it vaults them in your fat tissue. So anybody that's, concerned about the effect of these estrogen mimicking drugs, start looking at what's underneath your cabinets in your medicine cabinet and what's underneath your kitchen cabinets, because a lot of it could be starting right there. You'd be making a difference.
So you have spoken at every one but one or two of my events. I've had you come and do a talk on, I know we did hormones once because I was trying to make each event a little bit different. And because of that, you have, and prior to me, of course, you do your own presentations. You have a couple handouts that you're offering people. So I just want to talk about, and you can go to jjflizanes.com/hormones for that. There are two of them here. First, let's talk about this one, your metabolic makeover, how to balance your hormones and metabolism. So this sheet, you just want to tell people what they can learn from these sheets?
Oh, sure. Yeah, a lot of it's just understanding hormones. So really looking at the impact of insulin and cortisol, which is your stress hormone, which, is your fight or flight hormone. Understanding thyroid and, what makes, how does the thyroid work in the body, and then estrogen and progesterone. Understanding like just the phases of your menstrual cycle. I mean, that's a huge piece of learning for women. I mean, when I teach, I start any woman that comes into me that's having any PMS issues, whether she's 14, she's 24, or she's 44 or 64. Well, 64, they're not going to have menstrual cycles, although there probably are some women out there that still have a healthy. I want women to understand what the different phases of your menstrual cycle are and how they can impact your sense of well-being and your energy, and how you can optimize your diet during these time periods, how you need to care for yourself during the different phases, whether it's the follicular phase or the luteal phase. It's just helpful to know that. And now there's so many apps that women can download so they can be able to see just how am I doing during my own, and what could I do to help optimize. So you're going to receive that information. And then it's just the critical factors that impact hormone health that we just talked about, looking at inflammation, looking at diet, looking at estrogen mimicking drugs that may exist in your home, and how you can start to down regulate that, pull that out of your system. So I think that's some of the big things that you would be receiving.
I remember when we first started years ago, Jeannie and Al and I put on a few presentations together. So we were the doctor piece, the nutritionist piece, and the trainer piece. And we were looking at weight loss resistance and how to optimize weight loss resistance, how to move through it. And so I remember this one from way back when that's been utilized for years, right? So you have a quiz. There's the quiz, are you weight loss resistant, as well as how to optimize your hormones and your weight, your hormones, and your metabolism without eating less or exercising more. So again, you can go to jjflizanes.com/hormones for that. And it does have Jeannie's email address, phone number, website, for you to be in touch, because you are doing obviously Zoom. And
that's what we do. Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing, and believe it or not, because of COVID, we still are able to go and do telemedicine. So a lot of your insurance will pick up. If you even just wanted to check in and get some questions answered, don't hesitate to call, because Doc and I are happy to speak with people, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes you can get some tips and understand a little bit more about which direction you should go. We're happy to do that. But when we went ahead and did those talks, a lot of that information, like are you weight loss resistant, and how can you know, that's all still really relevant data. I mean, it hasn't changed, JJ. So good to get some good stuff with that. So please go ahead and download those, get access to JJ's information. And you could also just go to our website and get the hormone guide. And it's just an email. We're not going to go ahead and pound you with like tons of emails. We just don't do that. I maybe put something out 2 or 3 times a year. But in getting that, you'll have a lot of pieces of the puzzle that will help you understand a little bit more about where you are in your own in your own process, whether you're still PMS or maybe you're moving into menopause and you have a lot of questions and you just don't understand. A lot of data to help you understand.
Well, that's why for me, and I've said this often, but I did do a menopause like transcending menopause webinar, because I thought I finally need to record something in totality about the aspects of this. I mean, I'd put it in the book, it's in Invisible Fitness Formula, but it isn't like, it's not structured just for like menopause. But I've been a trainer for over 20 years, and 20 years ago, it was the same conversation about hormones.
Yeah,
that every year there's a new group of people moving into menopause. They're like, how come I'm gaining weight? I'm not doing anything differently. And I'm like, okay, I'm tired of having this conversation. I'm going to direct all of you to the presentation I've already done, because it will continue to be the same information every year.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I'm not that we're not loving to educate people, but at one point you got to, come on now. So nourishingwellness.com. So nourishingwellness.com to get the happy hormone guide for those of you that want to understand and have some of the data and research about bioidentical hormones and why you want to consider it or what you can do. And Jeanne and I did, again, at the beginning of my career here in podcasting on the Fit to Love podcast show, Dr. Allen and I did The Truth About Bioidentical Hormones, and that was a very old show, and it was even done on the phone because it was, it's so old. So it's not great quality of listening, but it's a great information. And Jeanne and I did the 5 steps to balance your hormones naturally. So that show lives on the beginning of Fit to Love. And so I would definitely recommend. And it also appears in my book, The Invisible Fitness Formula. So there are many things, because we're not going to be able to cover everything. I just wanted to, again, 6 years later, come back and address that it's bioidenticals are not dangerous. They're safe. You may need help. And then, so is there anything new, Jeanne, though, from that, like really new in this space?
Well, I would just say, I've been going to these hormone conferences with Doc, as from the time we started our practice. So we've been going, 14, 15 years. And 2 things that I would just say are really valuable to me. One is that I've been on bioidentical hormones now for probably 10 years, and I feel younger now. I'm able to do more. I'm able to physically do more than I was when I was in my 40s. I went into early menopause. I was PMSing because I was living life, burning the candle at both ends. I was PTA chair, and I was a fundraising chair, and I was trying to raise my son. I was trying to deal with my husband's burnout. There was a lot of things that were going on, and stress was a big picture of all of that. But now looking back, I realized, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how not only has it helped me with improving my energy, we have a test that we do in the office that assesses your brain health, and it assesses 5 different parts of your brain. And we've had patients who did this test 10 years ago have better results now than they did 10 years ago. So we know brain health, including my own. I do the test probably every 2 years, and it just keeps getting better. So lots of receptors in your brain for progesterone, for estrogen, for pregnenolone, for DHEA, things that can actually help your brain. And with the world being very aware of Alzheimer's, of cognitive decline, of just, multitasking and just our brains being on overwhelm, it's just another benefit. And so a lot of the hormone conferences that we've been at just recently have been really addressing what can we do to optimize brain health so that you don't have to live in brain fog, and that you can actually improve your synapses, your brain chemicals and things that you're firing at a level where you felt like you were when you were in your 20s. So that's a really positive direction. And we really are kind of excited about that area. And then also anybody that's on this podcast who's had any kind of traumatic brain injury. We're seeing more people who, maybe in their early years when they were playing sports, had concussions, and, doctors kind of dismiss it at the time. Well, guess what? 40 and 50 years later, it impacts your cognitive health. And so we're finding that bioidenticals can be amazing for helping to support people during the time of the injury, but also helping them years later to offset some of the damage that's been done. So I would say that, that's maybe an area that's new for me and that I'm excited about sharing with our patients every day.
So you've mentioned PMS 2 or 3 times, and I just got it. I haven't had PMS in, I can't remember how long. And part of that for me is stress, right?
Sure.
It's definitely stress.
I know. I've been there. I remember.
Yeah. And now that I mean, I didn't even think about that. Not that I would ever, I used to have really heavy bleeding and, I had from fibroids, and it wasn't even since the fibroid, it was even before that. Minus the bleeding. Like I don't think I can remember a time where I had to take a day off, or I felt,
Right.
ill, or I felt uncomfortable to the point of, not being able to focus or sit still. So yeah, absolutely. And we just did my hormones and you said they looked pretty good. So I do feel quite balanced. And of course that's all of it, right? It's the whole package. It's keeping your adrenals in balance. It's the rest versus work. It's the kind of work.
Yes.
It's the food. It's the stress. It's the meditation. It's just life. And I'm not currently taking anything on a regular basis that's bioidentical. I was doing a little bit of progesterone cream for a little while, and I may still want to do that depending on, we'll talk later about my progesterone level, which was fine. And I have to tell you where I was in my cycle when I took the test. It wasn't optimal in terms of I know it tells you should take it
Right.
during these days, and it wasn't. I think it was maybe after that. But I know, I was using a little bit. But again, I'm willing to do whatever I need to stay optimal, because I want to be healthy, dead. I don't want to be decline,
That's me too,
decrepit.
JJ. Yeah, I want to go ahead and just one day I'll go to bed and that's it. I just don't want to be suffering. I don't want to suffer at all. And I think you're that same kind of person.
Yeah. Well, I'm also willing to see, some people don't know what they don't know. So they don't know what their options are. They just wait till there's a problem and then they go, hey, what do I do to fix this? And we research things and we're interested in just life in general to say, how do I ensure this lasts? How do I take science that I know and follow the line and go, oh, after age 45, 50, you decline in hormones. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means loss of bone, potentially, loss of muscle, potentially, loss of brain function, potentially, right? Like we understand that. So we go, oh, well, I don't want that to happen. What do I got to do now to make sure that doesn't happen? It's, preventative, proactive.
Well, you have to think ahead. That's just a fact. But I guess it would also be for any women that are out there that feel like, I'm in my 50s or 60s and doctors are just telling me right now it's all part of the aging process. Don't buy that, because like I said, I'm swimming faster, almost as fast as I was when I was in college right now. And so my muscle mass is, at an optimal place. I just feel like I've got more energy that I can remember. So that's all possible for anyone. It's not just because I'm doing something unique. Honestly, I am taking the hormones, so I do think that matters, but I do think it's all the other things. It's looking at your chronorhythms. It's looking at your sleep. It's looking at, your quality of your diet, all these things that can mitigate some of the stresses that we're all exposed to, particularly now during COVID. So don't think that the first thing is that maybe you have to go and get onto hormones, but I think it's well worth having women understand, just knowing where you are, finding your baseline. What's going on with you now? Because, 5 years from now, there are some things in which maybe, you're seeing the steady decline of your progesterone, which is really the first thing that typically happens is progesterone starts going down. So naturally, estrogen is more dominant. And that causes a certain amount of anxiety and symptoms and things. But thankfully, everything is fixable. Everything is fixable. Everything can be worked out. There's always solutions that, you may not be aware of unless you start asking questions now.
I love that. Yes, everything is fixable. So when someone tells you, even a doctor, right? I had two people tell me, two, that said, no, you need a hysterectomy or that would be the safest. And I was like, no. And, that was the best, the gynecologist, when she's like, you make me nervous. And I said, well, isn't it also that this could go perfectly fine and everything works out? And she goes, yeah. I said, well, that's what's going to happen. Right. And so that when I came back to the appointment, she was like, well, whatever you want, you can have. What do you want to do? Do you want to go to do this? Okay, yes. She goes, you just keep doing what you're doing.
You just trained her. I love it.
She's like, you just keep doing whatever you're doing because it's working. And I was like, thank you. Well, she was younger than I. The other one, she's more crunchy, let's just say. She had a bigger ego to protect. So she would never had admitted that I knew my body better than she did, or her fear-based prescriptions that she was making. So, and it's fine. I'm not saying don't listen to your doctor. It's a combination of, listen to what they have to say, get second opinions, do your homework, learn something, be creative about problem solving, because it's just not one thing. You should have seen me in well, here's what could go wrong. And I'm like, Okay, great. I'm going to do problem solving. Well, what if we did this? And what if we did this? And I came up with like 10 different things. I was so proud of myself. Of course, the doctor's like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, why not? These are perfectly valid recommendations for how, but no, we're not into, we're into you do what I tell you.
But I think it's also something that, I know Dr. Northrup believes in this, and we just feel like we are always trying to educate our clients how they can even be better clients. So for example, having a notebook, keeping track, having symptoms, having all that written down, coming in to your doctor's appointment with a notebook of facts. I just did this with my sister because she's weaning herself off of a benzodiazepine, and it is not easy. And I helped her that if you're going to go ahead and help your physician understand what you need, you have to do the due diligence. You have to be willing to put the time in. So when she walked in and she had every single symptom, everything that was going on, everything that she was doing, he was impressed, and he started to really treat her differently. And as a result of that, she had one of the best sessions she's ever had just recently. So I tell this to all of our patients, start tracking everything so that you're coming in as a co-participant. We're doing this together. It's not something like, Alan knows this and you're over here. No, we're having a conversation. And that is a very empowering way to approach your own health and healing.
Yeah. Dr. Northrup says, as a physician, I have an expertise in a body of knowledge. You have expertise in your body.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So together we're going to come up with the plan, not I know better than you or you know better than me. We have different information, but you are the expert of your body and I have information that may or may not help your body. And together we'll figure what that's going to be. So, but that of course requires physicians without egos, and we're still trying to find all those ones who can actually, recognize and don't just do what they're told without thinking in terms of the pharmaceutical company. And, and again, not everybody gets into their profession for the right reasons. I mean, there are a lot of suicides in, I think, dentistry, and I wonder if that's because they choose it because they choose it for the money versus they actually love and have passion about helping people. It's not to say they're bad people. It's just that they may decide that that's something, being a doctor means I make a lot of money, but you're taking not very good care of yourself. The stress is really high. I mean, Alan, that's how we even got into this, is that Alan's career led him to adrenal fatigue.
Oh yeah. And he fired his physician because he was not happy with the way the physician was treating him. So just as another little tip, just know that every single, whether you're in an HMO or a PPO, there is a board that those physicians have to, they have to meet certain standards. And if you start making some complaints about the fact that you had a physician that didn't help me, you can usually go to your, like at Kaiser, it's a consumer advisory board. And you can just say, I'm not really happy with my physician. They're going to ask why, and you can actually just explain. It's important for you to realize that at every level that you have some power in which you can exercise that power. And Alan was super unhappy when the physician just told him, look, you're on Prozac, you're not taking enough, and you haven't taken it for a long period of time. You need to take it for a month. He's like, I took it for 2 weeks and I had like no libido, and sex is really important to my husband. So when you have a physician who just keeps telling you, keep doing something that's going to make you so that you don't enjoy, one of the things that he enjoyed the most, it was time to get a different physician, which he did. But as it turned out, what he really needed to do was educate himself. And that really made all the difference for him, where he felt like his real personal power was really held in check.
Well, that's why you're here. Alan had adrenal fatigue, very like a big time adrenal fatigue. Prozac was what was prescribed. He knew that wasn't right. So he had to learn about hormones. Hormone replacement therapy is what made all the difference, which is why you guys have a business together. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly.
It's the origin story of nourishing wellness.
Yeah, it is really. And it's amazing because he's 79 and he loves what he's doing still. So, and I don't see him slowing down.
Day to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a wonderful way that we can be outliving many of the physicians that treated him. We have literally outlived some of those physicians that have treated him. So, All right. What can we say? It's healthy aging. It's possible for all of us.
Yep. So go to nourishingwellness.com, reach out to Jeanne. If you let her know that you heard her, saw her on my show, you'll get, extra special treatment. Because she'll understand what point of view you're coming from, and might not have to educate you as much because you've already been educating yourself through my show and all the episodes we've done together, at least. So today's show myths about hormone replacement therapy, just as a reminder, you can go to nourishingwellness.com and download the Happy Hormone Guide. You can also go to jjflizanes.com/hormones for the 2 handouts that Jeanne's provided for you to take a deeper dive on your own to assess your situation. And then that way, when you're ready, reach out to Jeanne at nourishingwellness.com to have a session, or with Dr. Allen, or do what I did in terms of, I actually don't even have a doctor right now. I did my own labs, and you can get them to recommend which ones they want you to take. Sure. And you go pay for them on Life Extension. They find a local lab, they send them to you, you send them to them, and then you have a conversation about what would be prescribed to make them better. So again, take your health in your own hands. Don't listen to everybody. Do your homework. Check in with your intuition. Know that half the stuff, as I was going to say shit, half this shit is a paper trail of money. So please do not be a sheep, and ask questions and see what feels right for you, and ask more than one person. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. If you watched today's show, of course, you can download the podcast if you want to share it with somebody who doesn't want to watch. The link is right below this video. And make sure to reach out to Jeanne at nourishingwellness.com. Once again, Jeanne, thank you. I'm sure you'll be back on. We'll figure out what the next topic is. If those of you that are listening want Jeanne to talk about something else in particular, please email me or contact me through whichever way that you want, and we'll schedule to get that on. And it may be in the inner circle, or it may be here on the live and regular show. So thank you all for being a part of the show, and thank you, Jeanne, again.
Thanks, everyone. It was great being able to just share ideas with you. I hope that it inspires you to take more action on your hormones.